Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a breaking news Watchman Newscast live stream. Before we are done, we will have people tuning in from around the world, thousands who want the inside story, breaking updates on what's going on in Israel and in Gaza right now. Well, a lot is going on, as you might have noticed. Israel is striking back after, admittedly, and Israeli defense officials, military officials have said, look, we were caught off guard and they had the upper hand early. Hamas scored for them what was a short-term victory. But folks, that victory is not going to last very long because Israel right now is in the midst of planning a massive, I guess you could call it a counteroffensive, right? It's going to be what today Israeli officials called a siege of Gaza. The Israeli officials say that right now Israel is putting Gaza under siege, cutting off electricity, food, medicine, everything else. You might say, oh, that's horrible. Well, number one, Israel is at war now. Israel declared war formally yesterday for the first time in 50 years, but the war was declared on Israel on Saturday morning with this horrific, barbaric, savage, evil terror attack with men, women, children, and the elderly dragged into Gaza. We now have reports of Israeli soldiers beheaded by Hamas terrorists, women raped, little children paraded through the streets, beaten and smacked around in full view of the cameras. Big propaganda victory for Hamas, right? Well, it's going to be a very short-lived victory, if you could call it a victory, because I believe that this is going to end in Hamas's destruction and demise. Israeli officials have been very clear about that. My trusty producer, Daniel, quick question to Daniel. Do we have the chat going? I don't see anyone yet. I assume we've got people here. I don't see the chat because I want to be able to respond to your comments here and your questions. But look, where do we begin? So much is happening. I said yesterday, all the information I'm throwing at you is kind of like a fire hose, but bear with me because you need to know for such a time as this, because what's developing over there in the Middle East matters over here. No matter where you live, this will affect you, especially as, look, it looks to be escalating, which brings me, number one, to Hezbollah. The big question we've had since this all kind of got started on Saturday morning early is, will it become a multi-front war? Will Hezbollah get involved, and perhaps some other Iranian proxies, that Iranian ring of fire that surrounds Israel right now, will it ignite beyond Gaza? Well, right now, things are heating up to the north. Two things today that you need to take note of that have gone down. Number one, we had an infiltration of Israel's northern border by Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists. Now, you may say, Islamic Jihad, wait a minute, they're a Palestinian group. They're based in Gaza and the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. What do you mean, Lebanon? Well, remember, as we've detailed for you here in the newscast over the months, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad also have a very robust presence in southern Lebanon, where they operate under the watchful eye and with the full approval of their ally and friend, Hezbollah. Islamic Jihad today claimed this infiltration of Israel. The Islamic Jihad terrorists were neutralized. They were killed by the Israel Defense Forces. Thankfully, we did not have a repeat of the carnage that we saw on Saturday. Number two, Israel responded, and reportedly, Israel responded with bombing southern Lebanon. Again, that's the Hezbollah power base. Anything that goes into southern Lebanon, comes out of southern Lebanon, any activities there, again, happen under the watchful eye of Hezbollah. So Israel holds Hezbollah responsible, and as well they should. And Israel, in counterstrikes, reportedly killed 3 Hezbollah members in southern Lebanon. Now, Hezbollah has an MO that when one of their members is killed, they strike back. That's their MO. That's the way they do things. Now we have 3 Hezbollah members killed. We had the Islamic Jihad infiltration from the north. We have reports that Iran essentially has Hezbollah on standby right now and has told Hezbollah to be at the ready to possibly get involved in this growing war. So, folks, keep an eye on the north. Several towns in northern Israel right now are essentially on lockdown, where Israel is saying to these towns, great places like Metula, which you've seen here on the Watchman, where I've spent a great amount of time along the Lebanon border, a beautiful, beautiful region. Those towns right now are on the highest of alerts as Israel waits for perhaps the other shoe to drop and Hezbollah to get involved in this broadening war. and for the ring of fire to potentially ignite. And look, I've said the coming war that Israel will wage. And folks, I believe they may very well be in the midst of it right now in the beginning stages. I've called it the Great Northern War here on the newscast. Some have said it's Psalm 83. Perhaps. I've called it the Great Northern War. And I say that because, yes, although Gaza is a central player here, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, the bulk of the action, so to speak, eventually will occur to the north. That is the big one. As bloody and horrific as the Gaza situation is right now, it could be miles and miles worse to the north, considering Hezbollah's capabilities. Look, some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel right now. Not only that, Iran's presence next door to Lebanon, in Syria. That's why I've called it the Great Northern War. That showdown is coming. The situation along Israel's northern border is unsustainable. Israel cannot accept this existential threat on its northern border, and it may be coming now sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, that's the situation to the north, and I'm coming to you today live. Oh, I don't know. It's about 2:45 Central Time. I'm in Dallas right now, 3:45 East Coast time where I'm coming to you. By the time you see this later, and by the way, this entire live stream will be posted on our channel under newscast. So if you missed any of it, you can check out the entire live stream afterwards. And while you're there, if you have not yet, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted, folks. We are bringing you, again, daily breaking updates of the war right now, the first time in 50 years that Israel has declared war, and what Israeli officials say is a siege of Gaza. This is war, and that goes along with it. So Israel strikes back. That was the title of this live stream. How is Israel striking back? A few things, full disclosure. I'm here in Dallas filming special programming around the clock for TBN about this war, and we've been speaking to people in Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet. They are in security meetings around the clock, as you might imagine. We're trying to get some on camera. We had one on camera yesterday, trying to get more on camera so they can speak to people around the world and make Israel's case. Not that Israel's case should be very difficult at all to make right now, considering what just went down and the horrific demonic images we're seeing. But nevertheless, we have pro-Hamas rallies in New York City and in London and in elsewhere in the Western world. More on that in a minute. But I can tell you right now, around the clock deliberations in Israel, the big question, okay, let's lay it out. We laid out the Hezbollah piece to this. Are we heading towards a multi-front war? And by the way, Israel has been clear. A few things. Number one, Benjamin Netanyahu said today, this war against Hamas, in his words, will change the Middle East forever. That's his words. What does that mean? That can mean only one thing, that Israel is going to change the so-called status quo by completely destroying Hamas once and for all. Finally, deterrence didn't work, ladies and gentlemen. For 15 years, since the first major flare-up between Israel and Hamas, late 2008, early 2009, we've been told that every new operation, every few months or so, Israel has reestablished deterrence in Gaza. Meanwhile, the brave people of southern Israel, those beautiful communities where I've spent so much time along the Gaza border, are living under the constant cloud of rockets and terror tunnels. And then the culmination of it all, clearly this weekend, deterrence failed miserably as we saw the most heinous attack on Israeli civilians since 1948, since the War for Independence. Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, said today, this is worse than the Yom Kippur War, where terrorists infiltrated on Israeli soil and were there. There's still some gun battles. Israel says, look, we've got all the communities under control now. But up until this morning, there were still some gun battles with terrorists on Israeli soil who, again, decapitated, maimed, butchered, tortured, and raped the elderly, women, and children, intentionally targeting civilians, taking over 100 as hostage back to Gaza. These are echoes of the worst of the barbarian times some 2,000 years ago. That's the only thing I can compare it to, but with greater technology today on the part of the modern day Nazis and barbarians, the Hamas regime. So now Israel's response, and it's being planned, as I mentioned, around the clock consultations. It has to be an absolute game changer. If Netanyahu says we're going to change the Middle East with this operation, that, folks, I want to be very clear here. Fasten your seatbelt for the next few days and weeks. He's not talking about airstrikes and punishing airstrikes and toppling some communications buildings and Hamas infrastructure. It's going to be a ground invasion. It has to be. The airstrike only strategy, largely airstrikes only, has not worked. The reestablished deterrence strategy has not worked. This is an absolute game changer. When you're talking about changing the Middle East through this operation, through this war, Israel is all in. There's no turning back. Israel considers what happened over the weekend, it's Pearl Harbor, it's 9/11. It's that bad. As I come to you, at least 900 Israelis slaughtered, murdered, killed, as not only in the invasion, the Hamas invasion of southern Israel. Yes, you heard those words. A week ago, you may have thought you'd never hear that. Hamas invaded Israel. Not only that, the rockets continue to fall now in real time, reaching as far as Jerusalem. We have injuries right now on the outskirts of Jerusalem in places like Abu Ghosh, places I know very well. Jerusalem is my second home. Throw everything you know about the Middle East, about Israel, Hamas, Israel, Iran, Hezbollah, out the window right now. We're in a new era. It's going to be violent and bloody. I'm not being an alarmist. I'm not being sensationalistic. I want you to be prepared. I want the body of Christ in particular to be prepared and know what is coming. If you're here with us on the Watchman, I think you have a pretty good inkling what's coming. You've got discernment, and I think you'd rather know than not know. Hey, we live in Bible times. Wake up. This is no time for me to mince words. We're going to tell it like it is here in the Watchman. If you like what you're hearing, join us here every day because there's more to come. And we're talking to people regularly on the ground in Israel at the highest levels. So keep it right here. Changing the Middle East means destroying Hamas, number one, and not worrying about what comes next. You might say, oh, that's short-sighted. In this situation, objective A, B, and C, Hamas must be destroyed. And then we can move on to what's next. Because for years, since 2007, really, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, for years, 2006, the complete takeover in 2007, but for years, people have said, well, if you completely destroy Hamas, could you have something even worse after that? The better the devil you do know than the devil you don't know. Well, guess what? This is literally the devil at work. These people are satanic. And today, Netanyahu compared them to ISIS. Yes. And we all know about ISIS and that satanic, demonic barbarism. You're seeing a carbon copy in Hamas. We've known it all along, people who follow this closely. But in the West, people would say, look, we can deal with Hamas. Hey, they have a social services wing in addition to their military wing. They must be reasonable chaps. Or not. You saw how reasonable Hamas was with the footage over the weekend and what's coming out. And now Hamas is threatening to execute hostages. And on one hand, it complicates the Israeli response. On the other hand, there are reports that Israel is saying, my gosh, we want to save every hostage, our brothers and sisters who've been mercilessly kidnapped, but we can't let that hamstring our response. Israel must act now and act decisively. Hamas must be wiped from the face of the earth. Naftali Bennett, I mentioned earlier, the former Israeli prime minister, said today, these are Nazis. This is the equivalent of Israel fighting Nazis. The state of Israel did not exist during World War II, during the Holocaust. Today it does. They are fighting people who want to perpetrate a modern-day Holocaust. And Israelis realize the stakes. And Israel was on its heels on Saturday and yesterday. But Israel is now finding its legs and then some. And the response is coming. Expect a ground invasion. I don't know when. This is not something that can be done hastily where you just go in on the ground with no planning. Maybe several days. I would imagine it will be, would inventive be the word? It will be a surprise to Hamas in what Israel has planned. I would say that first and foremost. But changing the Middle East, back to that point. Two things here to keep in mind, folks. Number one, if Hamas is in its death throes and Iran's holding Hezbollah in reserve, Hamas is in its death throes, and it's ready to be dealt a knockout blow and cease to exist from an Israeli onslaught. Does Iran say, does Iran say to Hezbollah, now get involved? We can't let Hamas be completely defeated now. We need to bail Hamas out and Islamic Jihad, the other Iranian proxy in Gaza. Does Iran then activate Hezbollah? Folks, we are teetering here. Hezbollah may very well not get involved in this, but I find it hard to believe that over the next few weeks and even a few days, as Israel is conducting an unprecedented offensive against a devastating offensive against Hamas. And hey, look, an unprecedented terror onslaught by Hamas requires an unprecedented response by Israel, and that's what Hamas is going to get. But as Hezbollah and Iran see that playing out in real time, I find it hard to believe that they're going to just stand back and watch. Will Hezbollah go all in, full bore? I'm not sure, but expect more limited, at least, engagements between Israel and Hezbollah to the north, as Hezbollah also attempts to create a diversion. Now, I'm sure we have an active chat going. Sadly, I cannot see the chat, but I'm sure you guys are all commenting. You've got a good thing going here, and we have thousands with us right now, and by the time we're done, we'll have thousands more. What do you think? Hey, let me roll it out to you right now, put it out to you, everybody watching. Hezbollah getting involved, yes or no? Because, folks, listen, key point here. If Hezbollah gets involved, I believe we are watching the end of Hamas. They don't know that in their demonic ways and their plots and their schemes and their feet rush towards evil. They think they achieved a great victory here against the weak. Israel looked vulnerable. Israel looked weakened through this. They think they've achieved a great victory against the Zionist entity and that there's more to come now. They've softened Israel up for the larger blows by Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, etc. That's what they think. But listen, if Hezbollah gets involved, but it's not going to play out that way. I believe you're witnessing the end of Hamas. If anything good can come out of this heinous, horrific carnage, I think we will see the end of Hamas out of this. And it had to come eventually because the situation was unsustainable and the can was kicked down the road for decades. But if Hezbollah gets involved, full bore, with their entire arsenal, tens of thousands of foot soldiers, terror tunnels dug along the north, infiltrations of the north, 150,000 rockets and missiles, some of them precision guided. That will also mean the end of Hezbollah. So you may be witnessing right now, and I don't know what's going to happen with Hezbollah, but we may be witnessing right now, if Hezbollah chooses to get involved, the end of Hamas and Hezbollah. Israel, as reports emerge, and we talked yesterday about this Wall Street Journal report, pretty definitive that Iran planned and orchestrated, along with Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad, this Hamas onslaught against Israel, meetings in Beirut. We can talk about the massive intelligence failure on the part of Israel later, the worst, obviously, since the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. Hamas training even in the open, reportedly, for this assault, but apparently some Israeli intel folks and military folks said they're not really going to do anything, which is shocking to me, but that day will come for those recriminations. But in the meantime, let's focus on the here and now and Israel winning this war. That's Israel's view as well. There's anger and outrage, but that will be dealt with down the line after Hamas is crushed, and only then. But folks, I put this out to you. If Iran planned this, and again, planning meetings in Beirut, Iran apparently last Monday, a week ago today, gave the green light for this operation. If Iran was intimately involved in the planning, and listen, in past engagements between Israel and Iranian proxies, Iranian advisors, Revolutionary Guards Corps members, operatives were on the ground helping, advising these proxies in the war room with them. They have a shared war room during these conflicts, and Iranian advisors were there directing traffic and directing the operations. If that is proven to be the case here, and it looks like certainly, I don't know about the war room, but I'd assume it was up and running during this, if Iran did indeed engineer this, and it seems more and more likely that that's exactly what happened, does Israel strike Iran? You might say, oh, are you crazy? I'm not talking about a direct strike. And we talked about this on yesterday's live stream as well. Is it some sort of indirect strike against Iran? Think of Israel with sabotage attacks against Iran's nuclear facilities, against its ballistic missile factories, targeted assassinations of Iranian scientists and terror masters over the years. Does Iran just escape from this unscathed? If the head of the snake is in Tehran in the form of the Iranian regime, will they not be held accountable for this? Will they just kind of skate away and continue to take billions of dollars from the United States and sanctions relief and unfrozen assets, et cetera, and just get off scot-free here with no accountability? They just provoked the greatest slaughter of the Jewish people in one day since the Holocaust. Over 900 killed so far. Over 2,500 more injured Israelis. This was the greatest slaughter of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Iran apparently engineered the entire thing through its proxies. They're not going to be held accountable for that at all? Folks, I find it hard to believe. And I come back to that quote. It could be the theme of today's live stream from Benjamin Netanyahu. Changing the Middle East forever does not mean only destroying Hamas. That changes the state of play in Israel's immediate neighborhood in Gaza, surely. It doesn't change the region. Crushing Hezbollah, you're well on your way to changing the region. Sending a strong message to the Iranian regime, a deterrence message there, a way in which deterrence could work with Iran, that could change the region. Defanging the Iranian regime, that is what changes the Middle East. So look beyond Hamas and Gaza right now when you're looking long-term, bigger picture. Okay, we're wrapping up in just a few minutes, but keep the comments coming, keep the chat going. We've got more to cover before we go. Some more big notes here. We're going to end in prayer, by the way. A prayer straight from Israel, from a dear Israeli friend of mine who said, Eric, this is how we want you to pray. All of our friends watching right now around the world, especially the body of Christ, this is how you can pray for us. I'm going to get to that shortly. We're going to pray together here on the Watchman live stream. It's a pleasure for me and a joy to be with you and to be able to do this for such a time as this. As a follower of Jesus, as a follower of the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, things I'm saying here, folks, I couldn't say on CNN or BBC, even Fox News. I couldn't say these things. But working for TBN and with the channel here, we can deliver the message God has given us. This channel is by God and for God, and we don't have to mince words and bite our tongues. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. But if you do like it, welcome. We're going to tell it like it is here. But a few more quick points here before we end in prayer. And you're going to want to hear this prayer straight from Israel. Number one, 9 U.S. citizens killed. That has been confirmed. 9 U.S. citizens killed in this Iranian orchestrated attack, but we have radio silence from the Biden administration on that thus far. Or although I will say Biden has pledged his support for Israel and U.S. warships are sailing to the Eastern Mediterranean right now. But the elephant in the room, and I don't mean to downplay it by using that terminology, 9 U.S. citizens slaughtered in cold blood by Hamas and more U.S. citizens taken hostage, apparently, and dragged into the bowels of hell back into Gaza. Now, that rave party in the desert in the Negev, why these kids, and I guess I take it they're mostly young people, had a rave party about just a few miles from the Gaza border in a time of high alert is beyond me, but they did. And 260 of these rave partygoers were murdered in cold blood by Hamas. And there were some Americans among them, reportedly, and Europeans and others. That's a big point. 9 U.S. citizens killed. Let's see. We talked about the North. What else do we have here to hit on? 300,000 reserves called up. Some of my dear friends in Israel right now, guys in their 30s, even their 40s, have left their families to go to the front lines. An unprecedented call-up of Israeli reserves, over 300,000. Israel is at war. So what did you expect? In a time of unprecedented danger, some are saying this is the most precarious time ever since 1948 in Israel's modern existence. I tend to agree. You might say, Yom Kippur War, 73. The closest thing I would say would be 48, the War for Independence, where Israel was literally struggling for its survival. They were in 73 as well, but Israel had a clear upper hand then, even though they were taken by surprise. But now this is a multifaceted, multi-front war directed from the Iranian regime with hundreds of thousands all told in this ring of fire surrounding Israel, rockets, missiles, and attack drones. We'll talk about this Hamas operation another day and how they pulled it off. That's another story in and of itself. But 300,000 reserves mobilized, and we covered a lot of ground here in a short amount of time. Key points as we close. Number one, watch the North. Watch Hezbollah. 3 Hezbollah operatives killed. Does Hezbollah strike back, throw its hat in the ring in a major way? Number 2, watch for the ground offensive. It's coming. Number 3, watch for the world response. Israel has a window here to act. Israel's going to act regardless of what the world thinks in this scenario. It's Israel's 9/11. It's Israel's Pearl Harbor. The world right now, by and large, expressing solidarity for Israel, but already we hear of European leaders and the Biden administration discussing it amongst themselves and saying, hey, we can't have this escalate. So look in a few days as these images come out of Gaza of Israel striking and striking hard. The world will howl and gnash its teeth and say, ceasefire, ceasefire. Already, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was saying yesterday that he supports efforts towards a ceasefire before Israel even had a chance to respond, as Israelis, millions in bomb shelters, still, as rockets are raining down, as there are still firefights on Israeli soil with Hamas infiltrators. Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, is saying he supports calls for a ceasefire before Israel even had a chance to fire back. And yet, Israel is firing back, but look for the tide of world opinion. The UN Secretary General released a statement today condemning Israel as well. Israel's not innocent. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the message. Israel's not innocent in this, and their counterattacks, et cetera, et cetera. So already the UN's laying the groundwork. Watch for that. And I believe as supporters of Israel, people who love the nation, the people of Israel, who see that it is God has a title deed to that land, folks. Bottom line, enough said. You might say, well, look, don't bring quote unquote religion into it. Number one, for me, it's not about religion. It's about relationship with the Lord your God. But number 2, you can't separate God from Israel. I could give you secular arguments all day long about why you should support Israel. You cannot separate the God of Israel from the land of Israel. Sorry, I can make those arguments and make them forcefully and effectively without bringing, quote, religion into it. But at the end of the day, this is a spiritual battle. Lastly, prophetically, what do you think? Would love to hear your comments here. Isaiah 17. Is Psalm 83 a today prophecy? Was it fulfilled already? Are the seeds being laid for Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog? I believe they are. The wheels are in motion now. I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow or even next week, but I'm saying the prophetic chess pieces are moving on the board. Keep it all in prayer. Let's end with prayer. I think that's a good way to end. From a good buddy of mine in Israel. 1 second. Let me pull it up. And here we have. I said, how can we pray? We've got close to 1 million subscribers on our YouTube channel, many more around the world on TBN, our programming. How can we pray for you right now for the people of Israel? Here's what he wrote. He said, I would pray that God accompany our troops into battle, that he fight alongside them, that he protects them from all harm, that he miraculously brings all the captives home without Israel's needing to release murderers and terrorists in order for that to happen, because he knows Hamas wants to hostage swap, and Hamas is already talking about executing some of these hostages. We should pray that God bless Israel's leaders with courage, wisdom, and perseverance to make difficult decisions and ultimately to have the willingness and wherewithal to destroy Israel's enemies, not just deter them, he says, so that this never, ever happens again. Regardless of what the world may say, that God placed within the nations of the world an understanding heart and spirit. At the very least, if they will not help Israel, that they will not harm and not interfere with what Israel must do, as difficult and unpleasant as it may end up being. necessarily being. It's necessary. And that God bless his land and his people with true and lasting peace. A peace where children will no longer need to fear hearing a siren or need to run for shelter. A peace of mind, body, spirit, and soul. A complete shalom from the Lord your God. That's what we're praying right now for the people of Israel. I think that's a good way to close. We'll be with you tomorrow once again for a live stream, breaking updates, folks. Prayer works. If I've learned anything in my life, man, prayer works. Continue to pray for Israel and this situation. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for joining us. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.